How to use Desmos on the final exam. Desmos is a graphing calculator, an online graphing calculator. So if you go to Desmos.com, go to Desmos.com right now, you should see the website. And right here it says graphing calculator. Go ahead and click on that and you should have a graphing calculator available to you. So I want to go through the practice final, the questions that could help you with Desmos, right? So we have not used graphing calculators. You don't have to use a graphing calculator. But if you pay attention today and you understand how to use Desmos, it could help you out on a handful of questions and make things a lot easier for you. So we should know on this question number 4, it's asking which of the following is an absolute value equation that moves 3 units up from the origin. Well, you should know what absolute values look like. It's either this guy or this guy. It can't be the first two. That's a line, y equals mx plus b. There's a parabola that has a k-shift of 3. But anyways, these are absolute values, so it's one of these two. And the way to answer it would be to know the form y equals a, absolute value x minus h plus k. And knowing this, we know that h, think opposite of what you see, and that is the shift left or right. You guys remember that? Yeah. The k, you take it for what it is, and it's the shift up or down from the origin, right? The vertex would be hk. Anyway, which of these two moves 3 units up? Does this one move 3 units up, or does this one move 3 units up? The bottom one, right? That's the k value of 3. That's your answer. So let's say you're taking the final and you're at this question and you totally blank out. Like you're like, what? All you know is that absolute values are these guys, so it's one of these two. So you could guess and it'll be a 50-50 shot. Or you could actually type in, well, not that one. Type in one of those. Right here I typed in y equals absolute value of x plus 3, and you will see this graph, and it does shift 3 units up from the origin. So that's the one that it would be. Right now, I want to pause the video. Why don't you guys try graphing on Desmos. Y equals absolute value of x, close absolute value plus 3. See if you could get to this graph. Obviously, I don't want you to use Desmos on this one. It's too easy, right? You should know the form y equals a. Inside of the parentheses or the absolute values, there's the x minus h plus k on the outside. This is your up and down shift. This is your left and right shift, but you got to think opposite of what you see. Let's move on. Here's another question that we should be able to solve without a graphing calculator, but if you totally blank out, maybe Desmos will help, right? So it says, write a quadratic equation with the given roots, -1, 6, and 8. Well, first of all, you need to remember that roots are the answers. They're the solutions. Roots are answers, solutions, X-Intercepts. You guys remember all that stuff? Answers, X-Intercepts, roots, real zeros. All of them mean the same thing, right? So what it's asking for is which of these following will give you a parabola that has the answers -1, 6, and 8. And if you think about the graph, it's really saying which of these parabolas crosses the x-axis at -1, 6, and 8. So right now I would like you to type in, let's say, any of these into Desmos. So right now we are typing in y equals 6x squared minus 47x minus 8. That was one of the 4 options. And if we take a look at the actual graph, so when we look at the graph, it's so big you don't see the whole parabola, and that's okay because all we really care about are the x-intercepts. So what you should do with your mouse, click on the x where it crosses. Wherever the parabola crosses that x, click it, and it should give you the location of that x-intercept. Click it over here, it should give you the location of that x-intercept. So right here you could see 8, 0. That means that it crosses the x-axis at 8, which technically if it has an x-intercept of 8, that means that your answer is x equals 8, right? And over here it has x equals -0.67. Oh, I'm sorry. -0.167. And that is a fraction. And let's look at our multiple choice. Well, actually, this is -1/6. If you do it on a calculator, -1 divided by 6, it'll give you the -0.167 that's here. So we know that this guy right here is the correct answer, y equals 6x squared minus 47x minus 8. Does that make sense? Isn't that pretty cool? That we could actually I mean, yeah, of course, I typed in that first one. If I would have typed in a different one, it wouldn't have worked. Like this guy, it doesn't cross the x-axis at 8, so obviously that one's not it. This guy doesn't cross the x-axis at 8, so that one's not it. So you'd go through, maybe you pick the right one first, and you'll be good to go. I think it was the first one, right, this guy? So that's the answer. Now, what if we didn't have Desmos? How do we actually do this back at the beginning of this semester? We worked backwards. It wasn't at the beginning, it was towards the middle. You worked backwards. You have the answer x equals -1/6, x equals 8, and you work backwards from your answers back to the quadratic equation. Does anybody want to see that, or should we just keep graphing and keep practicing? You want to see it?
Yeah.
Okay, so how would this work backwards? Where did the answer x equals -1/6 come from? Well, I multiply by 6, I'll have 6x equals -1. And then I'd have to move the -1 over, +1, +1, giving me 6x + 1 equaling 0. So this is the equation where the answer x equals -1/6 came from. What equation gave us x equals 8? Anybody? Subtracting 8, it would be x minus 8 equals 0. That's where the equation, or that's where the answer x equals 8 came from. So now that you know that you have a binomial here and a binomial there, and they're both set equal to 0, we're using zero product property backwards to put them together and have 6x + 1 times x minus 8 together equaling 0. And we're actually going to distribute 6x times x is 6x squared. 6x times -8 is -48x. Now we're going to distribute +1 times x is +1x. +1 times -8 is -8. We still have the equals 0. We're going to combine the middle terms. The -48x and the +1x will give us a -47x. We still have the -8 that equals 0, and we still have the 6x squared in front. And you should identify that that is the quadratic equation that came from the answers x equals -1/6 and x equals 8. That was a lot of work. So you choose, do it the way we used to, just like this, or graph all of these on Desmos and see which one actually crosses at -1/6 and at +8. So those are your two options. Again, why am I showing you Desmos? You don't need it, but in case you blank out, you could graph it and see where it crosses, and it'll give you your answer. Now, you can do the entire test without Desmos, but sometimes it helps. Now, on this one, I probably would not use Desmos. I don't know. First of all, the only way to use Desmos, the only way to graph, we see that this is an x squared. We're thinking parabola, so this is going to be a parabola. However, to graph, you want it to be in the form of y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. You want a y equals, right? So the way to do that is to first set it equal to 0, subtract 3, subtract 3. What we have here is 9x squared minus 12x minus 4 equals 0. And then replace your 0 with a y. Okay, replace your 0 with the y. Because after all, if I did say find the x-intercepts, what would you do? You would set y equal to 0. That y would become that 0 that you see. So all you got to do is set it equal to 0, replace it with the y, put your y first, and then everything else second. And now you could actually type this in to Desmos. Okay, could somebody type this in? So I typed this in, and this doesn't really help me when you click on these. They're not nice values. But at the very least, I know that they're actual values, so I know there are going to be square roots involved. So maybe this one, it doesn't help us that much. So what I would do to solve this problem, I wouldn't use Desmos. I would first set it equal to 0, the way I did right here, and then I would try to factor, split, and solve, right? Or I would use a quadratic formula. It's totally up to you guys. Using the quadratic formula, well, I mean, I want to stick with graphing, so I'm not going to actually show you how I would use a quadratic formula. But you know what? You could still technically use Desmos. Now, what do I mean by that? We know that these guys are the answers. We know that the answer is x equals -0.276, and also x equals 1.609. Okay, so we know that. So if you wanted to, you could go to this first answer and on the calculator go 2 plus square root of 3, hit equal, it'll give you a decimal, and see if that decimal is -0.276. Does that make sense? And then you could go back and do the same thing, 2 minus square root of 3 with the calculator, hit equal, and see if it actually gives you that answer, 1.609. Okay, so you could actually use Desmos and compare and find out which one is your answer. It's definitely not going to be imaginary because it actually does cross the x-axis. So you would just be testing this one and then that one, right? 2 plus the square root of 2 times 3, hit equal, and then divide by 3. See if it gives you one of these decimal numbers, and then go back and go 2 minus 2 times the square root of 3, hit equal, then divided by 3, and see if it gives you the other decimal answer. So you could use Desmos that way. Of course, I would use a quadratic formula, but if all else fails, you could graph it and check your answers. This is an equation on the final where it says write the equation in vertex form. And then it says identify the axis symmetry and the vertex and the direction of opening. Anyway, this is in standard form right here, and we want it in vertex form. Obviously, these guys down here are in vertex form. What are the 3 things that you need to write an equation in vertex form? Anybody? A, H, and K. A, H, and K. Once you know your A, H, and K, y equals, the A is right here, parenthesis x minus h squared plus k. Then you could just plug it in with the A right there, the H right there, the K right there, and you'll have your answer. Okay, so what is the A value of this guy? 3. So you already know the 3. Now, you would have to use algebra to find your H and your K, because finding the H and K is really finding the vertex. And we know that the vertex is found with the formula x equals negative b over 2 times a. You guys remember that? No? I hope you do. And then you could take whatever answer you get and you could plug it into the x values. So you could solve for the y, and then you'll have your vertex x and y, which means you'll have your h and your k. Doing algebra. However, Desmos, you could graph this guy right now. Go ahead and graph this guy. Y equals 3x squared minus 12x plus 10. So there it is. I typed it in. Y equals 3x squared minus 12x plus 10. And when we look at the graph, we see those answers right there, but we don't want the answers. They want us to rewrite it in vertex form. So click on that vertex, and you will see that it's h value of 2, k value of negative 2. And you already knew from the beginning that your a value was 3. So if you know your a, your h, and your k, you'll be able to write your equation. That equation will be y equals 3 parenthesis x minus h squared, which minus 2, plus k, plus the k value negative 2. So this is the equation that we want. You didn't have to use any algebra. You didn't have to use the vertex formula of x equals negative b over 2a. You didn't have to plug it back into x's to find the y. You just graphed it and you found your h and k just by looking at the vertex. Yay? Nay? What the hey? I hope that makes sense to you guys. Here are a couple more that we're going to use. Now these, for sure, I would use Desmos, because they're asking us to solve a quadratic inequality. Now, that's a multi-step process where you would have to set it equal to 0, solve it either by factoring, splitting, and solving, or with the quadratic formula, and then thinking about the graph of the parabola where you plot your points on an x number line, and you would shade and then determine if your answers are on the outside or on the inside. It's a complicated process. Please pay attention right now. Let's set it equal to 0 by subtracting 18 on both sides. You will get 3x squared plus 3x minus 18 is less than 0. Again, setting it equal to 0, we do it so we could replace the 0 with the y. But of course, when we type it into Desmos, we don't want to type this in first, less than y. We want to type the y first. So put the y first, and it's opening up to the y, so it has to continue to open up to the y. And then you got your quadratic trinomial, 3x squared plus 3x minus 18. Type that into Desmos right now and check out what you see. There it is, typing it in. Let me show you the parabola. You can't even see the entire parabola, but who cares about the entire parabola? You just want to see the x number line. So if you click your cursor right there on the x number line and right there on the x number line, it'll tell you your answers, -3 and 2, your x-intercepts, which are your answers. So the shaded part is where your answers are at. So if it would have been shaded out here and out here, then I would say x is less than -3 and or x is greater than 2. If they were apart, I would keep the inequalities apart with the word or. But since they are together, I need to write this as a compound inequality together with the x in the middle, the -3 on this side, the 2 on this side with less than symbols. Now, if this would have been a solid parabola, I would have had solid lines underneath those inequalities. But because it's a dotted parabola, there's my answer. That's a compound inequality. Isn't that beautiful? Desmos helps us out a lot. So just by typing it, or first of all, let me reiterate. Just by setting it equal to 0, moving 18 over, setting it equal to 0, replacing it with the y, putting the y first, typing it into Desmos, you'll see that your answers are between 3 and 2, -3 and 2, which are these guys right here. How about you guys try this one right here? We have 3x squared plus 6 is greater than or equal to 11x. So we're going to subtract the 11x first, rewrite your quadratic trinomial on this side, greater than or equal to 0, because this cancels out. That's what you'd have over here, greater than or equal to 0. Replace the 0 with the y, move the y over here, move this over there. It was originally opening up to the quadratic trinomial. It has to continue to open up to the quadratic trinomial. It wasn't opening up to the y. It still does not open up to the y. You have to stay consistent with that. Anyways, if you type this into Desmos, typing it into Desmos, looking at the parabola, you will see that these x values of 3, that's 3, but it's going this way. So that would be x is what? Greater than or equal to 3. Why or equal to? Because this is a solid parabola, right? So that means it's a solid dot right there going to the right. X is greater than or equal to 3. And over here, we have the fraction going to the left, going to the less than side. So x is less than or equal to, and that looks like a 2/3. 2/3. And if you look at your multiple choice answers and divide 2 by 3, you'll see that it's 0.667, right? So anyways, you're going to write both of these answers apart with the word or between them. So that would be your answer right there. X is less than or equal to 2/3, or x is greater than or equal to 3. So there is your answer right there. Right here on this one, it says write an equation for the parabola that has a vertex 1, 5 and that passes through -1 and -11. Let's say you totally, does anybody know how to do this? Have you totally blanked out right now? So yeah, if we look at these and we know the form, y equals a, not absolute value, parentheses squared with the x minus h plus k. Your h is here, your k is there. And we know that the h is 1 and the k is 5. So where do we have a 1 right here and a 5 right there? Here's a 1, here's a 5, right? Right, so it could be this one. Or it could be this one, right? And yeah, algebraically, to find out which one it is, you could plug in this for x and this for y. You could plug in the x value of -1 and the y value of -11 and see if it gives you a true statement, right? Or you could plug in the x value of -1 right here and the x value of -11 right there and see if it gives you a true statement. Whichever one it works for, that's your answer. But we have Desmos, guys. So if you're not sure, which one is it? I already know it's one of these. Can't be these guys. These both have the vertex 1, 5. But which one of these passes through -1 and -11? You could type in both of these into Desmos. You're going to get your parabola. See which one actually passes through the coordinate -1 and 11. Right? Try it out. So as you can see, I typed in this one, the y equals -2, parentheses x minus 1, close parentheses squared plus k. And I already know that the vertex is 1, 5. That's what it shows here when I graph it. But I want to find out if it passes through the coordinate -1, -11. So if I look at my graph, it's going by 2's. So -1 would be right here in between 0 and -2. Is it crossing? Does it have the y value of -11? No, that has more like the y value of -3. So this one's not it. Does that make sense? So you guys could use Desmos to find out which one it is. So it's definitely not this one, which means this one must be your answer. Okay, if you type that in, you will see that it does have the coordinate -1, -11, and it does have the vertex 1, 5. And that's pretty much it, guys. I just wanted to demonstrate how on a handful of questions on the final exam, you could type in the quadratic, especially if it's a parabola. Type in the parabola, you will be able to see different details, like does it pass through -1 and 11? You'll be able to find out your answer that way. Or if they ask you for a quadratic equation they want you to solve, Just graph your parabola with Desmos and you could see the x-intercepts, and those are your answers because the x-intercepts are solutions. I hope this helps. You don't need to use Desmos, but it does make some questions, about 4 or 5 of them, a lot easier if you actually use them. Use Desmos.